He walked into the cafe for a coffee and to kill time. At the next table sat a man whom he had buried 3 years ago. I work as a private detective. Not too lucky, but not a complete failure either. I take on dirty jobs, unfaithful spouses, debtors, corporate espionage. Nothing interesting. That day I was on surveillance. I was waiting for my target in a small cafe on the outskirts of town, where you can quietly hide in a corner and watch the entrance. I placed my order, opened my laptop, and glanced around furtively. And then I saw him. He was sitting at the next table, drinking coffee, reading a newspaper. An ordinary man, except for one thing. I knew him. Max Collins. A man I had buried 3 years ago. I didn't just attend the funeral. I dug his grave myself. My throat tightened. My fingers convulsively gripped the cup. I blinked, checking if hallucinations were playing tricks on me. No. It was him. The same gaze. The same scars on his hand. Rain pattered against the grimy windows of Caffeine Corner, a dingy establishment that smelled of burned coffee and desperation. Perfect for my purposes. Nobody asks questions here, and nobody remembers faces. The barista, a lanky kid with more piercings than customers, slid my fourth coffee across the counter with practiced indifference. "Another refill, Mr. Reeves?" she asked, not really caring about my answer. "Thanks, Ellie," I mumbled, scanning the entrance for the 100th time. My client, Mrs. Henderson, had hired me to follow her husband, convinced he was having an affair with his secretary. Standard fare for a Tuesday afternoon in my line of work. I'd been trailing him for 3 days, and this cafe was the latest stop in his suspiciously mundane routine. I'd chosen a corner table with my back to the wall, laptop open to appear busy while keeping watch. The cafe was half empty, with just a few patrons scattered among the mismatched tables. A college student typing frantically, an old man doing a crossword, a middle-aged woman on her phone, and a man reading a newspaper. That's when the world shifted beneath my feet. The newspaper lowered slightly, and I caught a glimpse of his face. My coffee cup halted midway to my lips. Max Collins. The memory crashed through me like a tidal wave. 3 years ago. The warehouse by the docks. Gunshots. Blood. A burial at midnight. I'd met Collins while investigating a corporate embezzlement case. He was the whistleblower, scared but determined to expose his employer's dirty dealings. We worked together for weeks, building evidence against Meridian Pharmaceuticals. Then, suddenly, he disappeared. His car was found abandoned near the harbor, windshield shattered by bullets. The police labeled it a suicide, another desperate man driving into the water. But I knew better. I'd received his panicked call the night before. They found out. "They're coming for me, Jack." I searched for him. Against all advice, against all reason. I dug too deep. 2 weeks later, 3 men in balaclavas cornered me in a parking garage. The beating was methodical, professional. "Stop looking for Collins," one said, grinding my face into the concrete. "He's already dead." They showed me photos. Collins, or what was left of him. Then they made me drive to a remote location. A freshly dug grave. An empty coffin. "Fill it up. Consider it closed." I did as they ordered. What choice did I have? I buried an empty coffin and walked away from the case. Yet here he was, casually sipping coffee, reading the financial section like a man without a care in the world. I slowly reached for my phone, keeping my movements casual while my heart hammered against my ribs. I needed evidence. Proof I wasn't losing my mind. I angled the camera discreetly and snapped a photo. The sound was barely audible, but in that moment, it seemed to echo through the cafe. Collins looked up, straight at me. Our eyes locked. Recognition flashed across his features, followed immediately by something cold and calculating. He knew me. And he knew I knew him. He folded his newspaper with deliberate precision, left a generous tip, and stood. No rush, no panic. Just the measured movements of a man who has rehearsed his exit. I sat frozen, muscles locked in indecision. If I followed him, what then? This man was supposed to be dead. The people who wanted him that way had made their intentions regarding my involvement brutally clear. But I couldn't let him walk away. Not again. I threw some cash on the table and bolted toward the door, nearly colliding with a waitress carrying a tray of drinks. Outside, rain had intensified, transforming the street into a blur of headlights and neon reflections. I scanned in both directions. No sign of Collins. I pulled out my phone to check the photo, seeking confirmation that I hadn't hallucinated the whole encounter. The screen showed an empty chair. A cold sweat broke across my forehead despite the chill. I zoomed in, adjusted the brightness. Nothing. Just a vacant seat beside a half-empty coffee cup. What the hell? I muttered, looking back at the cafe. Through the fogged window, I could see my table. And beside it, the chair where Collins had sat moments ago. I ran back inside, ignoring the startled looks from the staff. The table was already being cleared by a busboy. Did you see him? I demanded, gesturing wildly at the chair. The man sitting here. Reading a newspaper. The busboy shrugged. Table's been empty since my shift started, man. I pulled up the photo again. Still empty. My hands were shaking now, adrenaline and fear coursing through my system. I needed to think. I needed to go back to the beginning. Back at my office, a glorified closet above a Chinese restaurant, I dug through my filing cabinet until I found it. The Collins case. A thin folder for a life that had ended abruptly and violently. I spread the contents across my desk, newspaper clippings about his disappearance, photos of his damaged car, notes from our meetings, the flash drive he'd given me with partial evidence against Meridian. Nothing I hadn't reviewed 100 times before, searching for answers that never came. I booted up my laptop and plugged in the flash drive. Most of the files were financial records, email printouts, meeting minutes, the standard paper trail of corporate malfeasance. But there was one file I'd never been able to open. Contingency.enc, password protected and encrypted beyond my technical abilities to crack. I'd tried everything back then, his birthdate, his wife's name, his children's names, various combinations. Nothing worked. On a hunch, I typed in today's date. The file opened. My breath caught as a video began to play. Collins stared back at me from the screen, looking nervous but resolute. Jack, if you're watching this, then something's gone wrong. I've either disappeared or been found dead. And now, 3 years later, you've seen me again. He smiled grimly. I know how this sounds. But I need you to listen carefully. I paused the video, my mind reeling. 3 years later. He knew. He had planned for this exact moment. I hit play again. Meridian isn't just cooking their books. That was a cover story. What they're really hiding is something called Project Lazarus. It's. He glanced over his shoulder as if expecting someone to be there. It's resurrection technology, Jack. Experimental nanocellular regeneration. They've been conducting illegal human trials for years. I reached for my whiskey bottle, suddenly needing something stronger than coffee. I found out because I was patient zero. Collins rolled up his sleeve, revealing the same distinctive scars I'd noticed in the cafe. I died, Jack. Heart attack, 2 years before we met. They brought me back as proof of concept. But there are side effects they didn't anticipate. He leaned closer to the camera, lowering his voice. The process creates a kind of duality. The physical body is restored, but something else happens to consciousness. It splits. One part remains tethered to the physical form, while another exists, elsewhere. Collins rubbed his face, clearly struggling to explain. If you're seeing this, you've encountered either my physical self or my projection. I don't fully understand it myself. Sometimes I'm in my body, aware and present. Other times, I'm watching from outside, unable to interact except through impressions. He looked directly into the camera. The warehouse by the docks. You need to go back there. That's where they continued the experiments. That's where you'll find answers. But be careful, Jack. Meridian has powerful people protecting their secret. People who would kill to keep Project Lazarus buried. The video ended, leaving me staring at a black screen, the implications slamming into me like freight trains. Was Collins really alive? Was what I saw in the cafe his physical self or this projection he described? And if Meridian could bring people back from the dead, what other ethical boundaries had they crossed? I copied the file to my computer and pocketed the flash drive. Then I checked my gun, a .38 special that spent more time in my desk drawer than on my hip. It felt reassuring in its weight. The abandoned warehouse district stretched along the city's eastern waterfront, a testament to the shipping industry's decline. Once bustling with activity, now it was a ghost town of rusting metal and crumbling concrete. The perfect place to conduct experiments nobody was supposed to know about. I parked my car several blocks away and approached on foot, sticking to the shadows. The warehouse Collins had mentioned was at the far end, a massive structure with boarded windows and chain-link fencing topped with barbed wire. For an abandoned building, security seemed excessive. I circled the perimeter, looking for a way in. The main gate was padlocked, but I found a section of fence pulled loose near the back. I squeezed through, tearing my jacket in the process. The interior was pitch black. I flicked on my flashlight, keeping the beam low. The cavernous space echoed with the faint dripping of water and the scuttling of rats. Huge shipping containers lined the walls, many rusted shut. But toward the back, I noticed something odd, a container that looked newer than the others, with a heavy-duty electronic lock. I approached cautiously, sweeping my light across the ground for trip wires or sensors. Nothing obvious, but that didn't mean they weren't there. The container's surface was cool to the touch, not weather-beaten like the others. I examined the lock, way beyond my lock-picking skills. This wasn't something you'd find on abandoned property. You shouldn't be here, Jack. I whirled around, gun drawn before I consciously registered the voice. Collins stood 10 feet away, hands raised placatingly. He looked solid, real, not like the ghostly apparition I'd imagined. Stay where you are, I ordered, my voice steadier than I felt. You've got a lot of explaining to do. I explained in the video, he said calmly. Did you watch it? I did. Resurrection technology. Consciousness splitting. You have to admit it sounds crazy. He nodded. I know how it sounds. I lived it, and I still struggle to believe it. He gestured around. But the evidence is here. All of it. I kept the gun trained on him. If you're really Collins, tell me something only he would know. A smile ghosted across his face. The night before I disappeared, we met at O'Malley's. You drank bourbon, neat. I had a club soda because I'd been having chest pains again. You told me about your ex-wife's new boyfriend, the dentist with the yacht. Said any man who calls a 20-footer a yacht can't be trusted. The memory hit me with perfect clarity. Not something I'd shared with anyone else. I lowered the gun slightly. How are you here? I saw photos of your body. Not me. A convincing double. Meridian has resources you can't imagine. He took a step closer. The night I disappeared, they took me to a facility upstate. Continued their experiments. But something went wrong. The split between my physical self and my other consciousness became more pronounced. Sometimes days would pass where I wasn't present in my body. And the cafe today? That was me. The physical me. I've been monitoring you, waiting for the right time to make contact. But they're watching too. They know I escaped. I holstered my gun, but kept my hand near it. What's in the container? Research files. Biological samples. Proof of everything Meridian has done. He moved toward the electronic lock. I can open it. I still have access codes. As Collins turned toward the container, I noticed something odd. His movements left faint trails in the air, like heat distortion on a summer road. And when my flashlight beam passed through him at certain angles, there was a subtle transparency to his form. Collins, I said slowly. Are you really here right now? Physically? He paused, back still to me. What do you mean? In the cafe, I tried to take your picture. The photo showed an empty chair. He turned, his expression unreadable. Technology like this has unexpected properties. Cameras don't always capture me. Light interacts strangely with regenerated tissue. It sounded plausible, but something felt off. I took a step back. Opened the container. Collins nodded and approached the keypad. As he reached for it, his hand passed through the surface. He tried again, concentration etched on his features. This time, his fingers made contact, pressing the keys with deliberate precision. The lock beeped, and the door began to slide open. Jack. The voice came from behind me. I spun around, gun drawn once more. Another Collins stood at the warehouse entrance, identical to the first. Don't trust him, the second Collins said, pointing at the first. He's not me. Not really. I looked between them, mind racing. What the hell is going on? The first Collins backed away from the container. He's the projection, Jack. I'm real. He held up his hand, showing the distinctive scars. See? Solid. Physical. The second Collins approached slowly. We're both me, in a sense. Two sides of the same consciousness. But only one of us is trying to help you. My head throbbed with confusion. How do I know which one to trust? You don't, the first Collins said. That's the problem. Look in the container, the second Collins urged. See for yourself what Meridian has done. I edged toward the open container, keeping both Collins' figures in my peripheral vision. Inside, sterile steel shelving gleamed under harsh fluorescent lighting that had automatically activated. The shelves held specimen jars, computer equipment, and file boxes labeled with alphanumeric codes. I stepped inside cautiously. One wall was lined with photographs, dozens of faces, each with dates beneath them. Collins was there, but so were many others. Men and women of various ages, all with the same haunted look in their eyes. Test subjects, the second Collins said from the doorway. All of us. Some didn't survive the process. Others survived but changed. I picked up a file at random and flipped it open. Medical jargon filled the pages, but certain phrases jumped out: cellular regeneration, consciousness mapping, quantum entanglement of neural patterns. They weren't just bringing people back, I murmured. They were trying to understand what happens to consciousness after death. Yes, both Collins figures said simultaneously. I turned to face them. Why show me this now? After 3 years? The first Collins stepped forward. Because they're starting phase 2. Mass production. Marketing it as a medical breakthrough. The side effects would be catastrophic, the second Collins added. Thousands of people trapped between states of being. I rubbed my temples, trying to process it all. So what do you want from me? Expose them, the first Collins said. Stop them, said the second. I looked back at the evidence before me. With this, I could blow Meridian's research wide open. But at what cost? The people who had warned me off 3 years ago wouldn't hesitate to silence me permanently this time. A sudden noise from outside the container, footsteps, multiple sets, approaching rapidly. "They're here," both Collins' figures said, alarm identical in their voices. I grabbed a handful of files and a small hard drive labeled Project Lazarus, Phase 1 Findings, and shoved them into my jacket. "Is there another way out?" I asked, reaching for my gun. The first Collins pointed to a small door at the back of the container. "Service exit. Leads to the loading docks." I moved toward it, then hesitated, looking back at the two identical men. "Which one of you is coming with me?" They exchanged a glance, something unspoken passing between them. "Neither of us," the second Collins said softly. "We can't leave this place." "Not really." "What do you mean?" The first Collins smiled sadly. "Remember what I told you in the video? About the duality?" Realization dawned slowly. "You're both projections." The second Collins nodded. "My physical body is still at Meridian's facility. These forms are echoes. Imprints. Strong enough to interact with the world in limited ways, but tethered to this location." "Why here?" "This is where I died the second time," the first Collins said. "After they faked my death to scare you off, they brought me here for further testing. Something went wrong. My heart stopped again. When they revived me, the split was complete. My consciousness fractured." Footsteps grew louder outside. Flashlight beams swept across the warehouse floor. "You need to go," the second Collins urged. "Now." I hesitated. "How will I find you again?" "You won't need to," the first Collins said, gesturing to the files I'd taken. "Everything you need is there. Names, dates, research data." "What about you?" Both smiled that same sad smile. "Help me by exposing them. It's the only way I'll ever find peace." I nodded and slipped through the service door, emerging onto a rusted loading dock. Behind me, I heard shouts as Meridian's security team entered the warehouse. I didn't look back. 3 days later, after reviewing the files and hard drive contents, I sent everything to a journalist I trusted at the Tribune. The story broke the following week: Meridian Pharmaceuticals accused of illegal human experimentation. The FBI raided their facilities. Arrests were made. Stock prices plummeted. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. Today, I returned to the cafe. Same corner table, same vantage point. I'm not sure what I'm waiting for. Perhaps a glimpse of Collins, to know if exposing Meridian had truly given him peace. Hours pass. The cafe empties as evening approaches. Ellie gives me a concerned look as she wipes down the counter. "Closing in 10, Mr. Reeves," she calls over. I nod, gathering my things. That's when I notice the newspaper someone left on the next table. Folded open to a specific article, Meridian CEO found dead in apparent suicide. A chill runs through me. I didn't see anyone leave the paper. I scan the cafe once more. Empty. As I step outside, my phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. "You still don't understand, do you? It's not just me who died 3 years ago. It's you." I look up sharply, searching the darkened street. Across the road, a figure stands beneath a streetlight. Collins. Or whatever he is. He raises a hand in greeting, then turns and walks away, fading into the night. I start to follow, but my reflection in a storefront window stops me cold. For just a moment, I see through myself, translucent, like Collins in the warehouse. Am I chasing ghosts, or have I become one? If Collins is right, then what am I? A man, a memory, or something in between? I continue walking, questions echoing in my mind. If I died 3 years ago, why am I still here? What tethers me to this world? And more importantly, how do I know which reality is real? The street stretches before me, empty and full of shadows. Somewhere in this city is the truth. I just have to find it. Even if that truth is that I've been dead all along.